My name is Emily Carter, and I was 36 years old the morning my husband placed a small makeup kit on my bedside table as if it were a thoughtful gift. The truth was, it wasn't a gift, it was a message. His name was Ryan, and looking back now, that moment told me everything I needed to know about the kind of man he had become. I still remember every detail, the expensive concealer he bought, the careful shade he picked, the way he avoided my eyes while setting it beside me before heading toward the bathroom, as if covering the damage mattered more than causing it. The night before had started with a simple conversation, or at least it was supposed to be one. Ryan wanted his mother, Linda, to move into our house permanently. The problem was that this wasn't a new discussion. Before we got married, we had talked about boundaries, privacy, and what our future would look like. I had always been honest about one thing. I would never agree to sharing our home with either set of parents. Ryan had agreed back then. Or maybe he had only pretended to, because when I calmly said no that evening, something changed in his face. The man standing in front of me no longer looked like the husband I thought I knew. What happened next only deserves one paragraph, because I refused to let it take up more space in my life than it already did. He grabbed me, he shoved me against the hallway wall, then he struck me, twice. After that, he walked into our bedroom, climbed into bed, and fell asleep as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I spent most of the night sitting alone at the kitchen table. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply sat there with a cup of coffee growing cold between my hands. At around 3 a.m, I noticed a scratch on the wall where my shoulder had slammed into it. Oddly enough, that tiny mark became the thing I couldn't stop staring at. Not because it hurt, because it reminded me that damage always leaves evidence. And in that moment, I realized something important about myself. I am capable of waiting when I know exactly what I'm waiting for. Ryan left for work at 7:41 the next morning. I remember because I watched the digital clock above the stove as I listened to his SUV back out of the driveway. The garage door closed. The engine faded away. Silence filled the house. Only then did I stand up. I walked to the bedroom closet and reached for a storage box, hidden behind winter blankets on the top shelf. Inside were documents I had quietly collected over the previous year. Bank statements, insurance records, copies of financial reports, screenshots, passwords, and a credit card opened solely in my name months earlier. I hadn't gathered those things because I planned to leave my husband. At least not then. I gathered them because experience had taught me something valuable. Hope is not a strategy. Preparation is. Hope had carried me through the first years of marriage. Preparation carried me through the last 2. I brought the box to the dining table and opened my laptop. The truth was, everything had changed the previous night. Not because Ryan hurt me. That was terrible enough. Everything changed because of what I found afterward. His mother was scheduled to arrive for lunch the next day. And while Ryan slept peacefully beside me, I discovered something buried deep inside his computer. Something far more dangerous than another woman. Far more expensive than a gambling problem. And far more destructive than he could possibly imagine. Linda arrived shortly before noon. She wore a designer blouse, gold earrings, and the same judgmental smile she had worn every time she visited our home. She carried her famous peach cobbler like it was a trophy, the kind of dish she brought everywhere to remind people how much effort she put into being admired. I greeted her politely, I took her purse, I offered coffee, and I smiled. Ryan watched everything, the entire time. Not nervously, not regretfully, proudly, like a man who believed he had won. I had followed his instructions, long sleeves despite the summer heat, makeup covering the bruises, a pleasant smile for his mother. At one point during lunch, he glanced across the table and gave me a subtle nod. Approval, as if I were an employee passing a performance review. I smiled back, just enough to convince him he was still in control. After lunch, they moved into the family room while I cleaned dishes alone. Standing at the sink, I looked out toward the driveway and started calculating numbers. Not household numbers. Legal numbers. Financial numbers. Life-changing numbers. Ryan worked for a development company called Westbridge Capital. He had been there nearly a decade. Senior investment director. Excellent salary. Excellent reputation. The kind of position that made him feel untouchable. His boss was Michael Harrington, a respected executive in his 60s who built his career on transparency and ethics. Ryan admired him, feared him too. What I found on Ryan's computer was a hidden folder disguised beneath old archived files. Most people would have missed it. I almost did. Inside were private contracts, wire transfers, property agreements, confidential emails, large payments routed through companies that had no connection to Westbridge Capital, money that never appeared in official company records, money that wasn't supposed to exist. Hours earlier, I had already spoken with an attorney named Rachel Monroe. When I explained what I found, she became unusually quiet. Then she asked me to send copies immediately. Every page, every screenshot, every record. I did. Before ending the call, Rachel gave me 2 warnings. The first was that what I described sounded like serious financial misconduct, possibly criminal. The second warning was more personal. She told me that once information like this reaches the right people, there is no pause button, no rewind, no taking it back. I told her I understood, because I did. I had spent years preparing for a moment exactly like this. The next morning, I called Michael Harrington's office. I didn't accuse Ryan of anything. I simply requested a private meeting regarding company matters. By 11 o'clock, I was sitting in a leather chair outside Michael's office with a folder resting on my lap. His assistant offered me water. I accepted. When the meeting began, Michael greeted me politely. At first, he didn't recognize me. Then he noticed my face, the fading bruise, the expression I couldn't hide. Recognition slowly appeared. "You're Ryan's wife," he said. "Yes," I replied. Then I placed the folder in front of him. I didn't give a speech. I didn't tell a story. I simply let the documents speak. Page after page, transfer after transfer, email after email. I watched his expression change. Shock, confusion, anger, then certainty. When he finished reading, he carefully closed the folder and stared at it for several seconds. The room became very quiet. Finally, he reached for his phone. That was all I needed to see. I stood, picked up my handbag, and informed him that my attorney already possessed identical copies. He nodded slowly. I thanked him for his time and left. Outside the building, cold wind brushed against my face. For a moment, I stood perfectly still, not because I was emotional, because I wanted to remember that feeling forever, the feeling of finally putting down a burden I had carried alone for years. Ryan started calling shortly after 2 o'clock. I ignored every call. Then came the text message. 4 words. "What have you done?" I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then I locked my phone and continued making dinner. By then, the answer no longer belonged to me. The final chapter arrived sooner than Ryan expected. When he entered Michael Harrington's office later that morning, he expected an ordinary meeting. Instead, he found me sitting beside his boss, waiting. His confidence vanished instantly. His eyes moved from my face to the folder on the desk, then back again. The color drained from his skin. Michael instructed him to close the door. Ryan obeyed. For the first time in years, he looked genuinely afraid. What he didn't know was that Rachel had already filed everything that morning. The separation paperwork, the protective order, the financial disclosures. Every document had already been submitted. The decisions had already been made. The story had already ended. Ryan simply hadn't reached the final page yet. The truth is that the most powerful moment in my life wasn't exposing him. It wasn't watching him lose control. It wasn't seeing fear replace arrogance. The most powerful moment was realizing I no longer needed his permission to choose my future. He returned home that evening and packed a single suitcase. He barely spoke. He avoided looking at me, and when he finally left, he forgot the peach cobbler dish Linda had brought for lunch. A week later, I mailed it back to her. No letter, no explanation, just the empty dish. Some messages don't require words.